Good morning. Okay, we are on the bottom of Pei Dalid Amud Aleph. Welcome. Okay, bottom Pei Dalid Amud Aleph, the last line, Masiv Rav Ilah. Okay, so we're going to talk. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about Tumah, and then we're going to get into laws of Kilayim, which is a whole different set of laws, which we're going to again learn about something else, which we probably would not have put any thought into. But a new mission and a new set of halachos, a little bit of planting. Okay, anyone here have a garden? Garden? Anyone? No. Okay. Whatever. We'll learn about it anyways. Okay. So Pei Dalad Amud Aleph, all the way on the bottom. Masiv Rav Ilah. Our learning is Lila Nishmas Mindel Mariam Bas Kalman Ruvain. Her neshama should have an aliyah. Okay. Masiv Rav Ilah. Rav Ilah asked the following question. So bless you. So the last thing we discussed was the fact that an earthenware vessel is not going to be tamei tumas midras. Tumas midras is a unique tuma that is generated by a zav or a zava. Okay. So a zav or a zava is a man or a woman who has a specific type of discharges of this very specific type of pattern, and they become tamei, and they contaminate other things. They cause other things to become tamei, and one of those tumas is called tumas medras. Tumas medras is sitting down type of tuma. When I sit on something, it becomes tamei. That's tumas medras, okay? And we established that an earthenware vessel is not able to become tamei tumas medras, and the source for that is what? The basic limud that we saw yesterday, two different sources, but they basically were saying the same thing, that we learned that for something to become tumas medras, it has to be able to be untame, which means tahar, through purification in a mikvah. And since earthenware vessels, we know, cannot become purified in a mikvah, okay, which we talked about yesterday a little bit, right? So earthenware vessels cannot become purified in a mikvah. Since we know earthenware vessels cannot become purified in a mikvah, and tumas medras is only able to become tamei, tumas medras is only applicable to things which are able to become purified in the mikvah. Therefore, earthenware vessels cannot become tamei tumas medras. That was the basic limud. Today, what we're about to ask is we're about to point to something which seemingly does not become, which is not able to become purified in a mikvah, and yet the Torah seems to say that it has tumas medras. So the whole limud seems to be faulty. Okay, yeah. So Masiv Rav Ilah, mapat b'meis b'nayin. How do we know that a reed mat is susceptible to tuma? Okay, so the Torah says Pei Dalad Amud Beis v'dinhu. The Gemara says it's a kal v'chomer. Uma pachin ketanim shetahorim b'zav tameim b'meis. Okay, so small earthenware vessels, okay, are not susceptible to becoming tamei through a zav. Okay, and yet they do have corpse tuma. Okay, so what does that mean? Pachim ketanim are not able to become not able to become tamei through a zav. Without, just for the sake of everyone's head not exploding, we're going to just accept that as a fact. Okay, we're not going to explain all the stories behind that, but the bottom line is that pachim ketanim, small vessels, small earthenware vessels, like very tiny ones that you can't even put a finger in. Okay, so like a vial, like imagine something we use for like drawing blood or something like that, like a vial that is earthenware, is not susceptible to tuma, to zav tuma, yet they do have contamination with corpse tuma. Okay, so mapat shetame b'zav eino din she'etame b'meis. So a mapat, okay, which is a reed mat, which is able to become tamei by a zav, okay, for sure should be able to become tamei meis. Okay, now ask the Gemara, v'amai. Why is it, how is it, that the Bryce is assuming that a reed mat is susceptible to tuma of a zav, i.e. tumas medras, halesli tar b'mikvah? A reed mat is not able to go into a mikvah, is not able to become purified in a mikvah. So why is it that a reed mat is able to become tumas medras? In other words, within that lima that we just saw, the Gemara just said that a reed mat is able to become tamei tumas medras. And now the Gemara is questioning, why is a reed mat able to become tamei tumas medras? At the end of the day, it can't go to the mikvah. If it can't go to the mikvah, then, meaning, if it's something which wouldn't go to the mikvah, then it wouldn't be purified in the mikvah, then why would it become tamei tumas medras? So Amalei Rav Chanina gives the following answer. He says, Shani Hasam, Ika Bemino. It's true, a reed mat itself should not in and of itself become tamei. But since within reed is basically a type of wood, and there are types of woods that can be purified in a mikvah. Okay, therefore the reed mats will also be able to become tamei tumas meis. Whereas when it comes to earthenware, there is not a single type of earthenware that's able to become tamei. So basically, Rav Chanina's svara is saying like this. He's saying earthenware is not able to become tamei tumas medras because earthenware cannot be purified whatsoever. It cannot be purified in mikvah. But when it comes to a reed mat, it's true, a reed mat is not able to become purified in a mikvah, but there are other types of reeds, i.e. wood, which are able to become purified in a mikvah, and therefore, when we talk about wood in general, it's not excluded from tumas medras. That's his basic svara. Okay, Amar Le. Okay, now we have rabbinic ribbing, I guess you'd say, or Amar Le. Rachmana litzlan mehai daita. He says, may God save you from this understanding. Okay, what in the world are you talking about? May God save you from such ridiculous understanding. And then Adraba. Okay, this almost sounds like a little childish. Adraba. Rav Chanina says, Rachmana litzlan mehai daita. May Hashem save you from your understanding. Okay, fine. It's incredible how the Gemara records this type of dialogue. Okay, bottom line is Melchamto Shel Torah, right? Our sages are fighting over what is the truth, and therefore they were not mincing words. They were very, very sharp. Okay, so the Gemara says like this: at the end of the day, Rav Chanina, his svara is a little bit weak. In other words, like this. In other words, yesterday we learned, again, let's just review. Yesterday we learned that earthenware is not going to become tamei tumas medras. Why? Because the pasuk said that a person is compared to the items which are tamei tumas medras. And the Gemara learned from there. Just like a person is able to be purified, i.e. they go to the mikvah and they can be purified, so too the items which are tamei tumas medras have to be able to be purified. And that's why we excluded earthenware. Okay? And now Chanina is coming along and telling us this very bold and wild idea. Granted, a mat is not something which is able to become purified, but since a mat is part of the general category of wood, and there are woods that are able to become purified, therefore a wooden mat is able to become tumas medras. It's a bit of a leap. So the Gemara says, Chanina, at the end of the day, granted, you could argue with a bunch of insults to your friends, but what's the svar? What's the source for this? So Rav Chanina says it's actually based on the pasuk. Why? Because Trei Kraik Sivi. There are two verses that are written about tumas medras. Ksiv. There's one pasuk that says V'ish asher yigam mishkavo. A person who will touch his couch. Now there it says a person who will touch his couch. So there it juxtaposes the person to the couch. Uksiv. There's another pasuk that says Kol mishkav. There it just says a couch. It doesn't say the person's couch. It doesn't limit the couch to being connected to the individual. It just says a couch that a zav will lie upon. So haketzad. So on the one hand, one pasuk says mishkavo, his couch, which implies that there's some comparison between the couch and the individual, and that's where we learned the original limud that excludes earthenware. But then you have another pasuk which just says mishkav. It does not say mishkavo. It doesn't say his couch. It just says a couch. So hey, Kate said, how do you reconcile these two psukim? So like this: yesh b'mino, if there is within that category of vessels, afagav deleisle tar b'mikvah. So if there is within that category of vessels a type of vessel which could be purified in a mikvah, even though that particular vessel cannot be purified in a mikvah, it would still have tumas medras. I.e., and what's that applicable to? To wood, because there are wooden kalim which will be purified in a mikvah, and therefore, even though the mat is not purified in a mikvah, it's going to have tumas medras. Ain b'mino, but if within that entire category there is not something which could be purified in a mikvah, i.e., earthenware, makish mishkavolo, then we compare it to the individual. And we say, just like the individual needs purification in the mikvah, so too the utensil, and by earthenware, there are no earthenware vessels which can be purified in a mikvah. Okay, so the bottom line is, Rav Chanina justified his approach, saying that a mat is able to become tamei tumas medras because within the general category of wood, there is purification in a mikvah. Okay, Rava Amar. Now we go back to another proof that earthenware vessels are not subject to midras tuma. Rava Amar Rava says like this: Midras klicheres tahar mehacha. This is a source that an earthenware vessel is going to be tahar and not have tumas medras. Why? Because it says v'chol kli pasuach asher ein tzamid pastel alav. Okay, so a few weeks ago we spoke about, the Torah talked about roof tuma. Meaning, what's roof tuma? Roof tuma is as follows. Let's say we're in this room, and let's say a person were to pass away. So what happens is that since, even though I'm not touching that, the person's all the way in that corner, I'm not touching them. I'm not even anywhere near them. But since there is a roof over there here, everything in this room is going to become tamei. Okay? And the pasuk says, about that, it says, V'chol kli pasuach asher ein tzamid pastel alav. Any earthenware vessel that has no cover on it is going to become tamei. Okay, that's what the pasuk says. That so if there's an earthenware vessel in this room and it has no cover on it, it's also going to become tamei. So the Gemara implies though, hayesh tzamid pasel alav taharu. If it has a cover on it, okay, if it has a cover on it, then it's going to become tahar. Then it remains tahar, right? The pasuk's saying if it's an earthenware vessel which is uncovered in this room where the corpse, it's going to become tamei. If it's uncovered, then if it's covered, it's going to be tahar. So the Gemara says, Milo skinan diachadinu liishto nida. Are we not talking about a case where this item that we're talking about may even be a seat for his wife who's a nida, okay, and she sat on it, v'k'amar achmana tahar, and yet the Torah says that this vessel is tahar. Okay, so what's going on over here? Even though the nida sits on it, okay, even though the nida sits on it, and we say this item is tahar. Now, there is a general rule that something which itself is tameh is not able to interpose and block tumah. If something is tameh, meaning whenever we're going to have a concept of something being a barrier to tumah, it itself has to be, if it itself is tameh, it can't possibly be a barrier of tumah. If it itself is tameh, then tumah should be presumably be able to go through it. If it's tahar, then you could say it's not going to go through. So the Torah is telling us about this vessel which has a cover, which is going to prevent tumah from going to the rest of the vessel. So the only way that's going to make sense is to say that this vessel is tahar. Okay, what does that seemingly imply? That seemingly implies that you could have a vessel which could be a seat for someone who's tameh as a zav or a nida, and yet it's going to remain tahar. What does that tell me? What that tells me is that there's an earthenware vessel which could be a seat which remains tahar, i.e., telling me that when it comes to earthenware, the earthenware vessels will not become tameh tumas medris, and now we can understand why when this earthenware vessel has a cover, it's going to interpose and block tumah of ohel of actually hitting the rest of the utensil. And from there, Rava wants to learn that an earthenware vessel is going to not have tumas medris. If you have not been following anything until now, we're about to start a new Mishnah. So let's start again, okay? Woo! Okay, we're gonna take a break from Tumah and Tahara. I know it's not easy. It's learning by immersion. In other words, like every time you learn a little bit more, like it adds a little bit, and it just like all comes together at some point, and eventually it starts to make sense. But so it's not like for naught. It's there. It's somewhere in the back of your head, and as we continue to learn, you'll end up like developing further and further in the notion, all the different ideas of Tumah and Tahara. Good. Fantastic. Okay, so now let's learn about kilayim. Okay, kilayim, very important halacha, not well known, but for good reasons not well known. Okay, there is an issur in the Torah of planting different seeds together in the same place. Now, okay, what is the reason behind kilayim? It's one of those that some say is like a little bit of a chok, but it's similar to the idea of shatnez. Okay, so shatnez is specifically wool and linen, but the idea is basically we're not supposed to be breeding or placing two things together which are not made together. Okay, that's the basic idea behind it. So shatnez applies outside of Israel as well, right? So shatnez, we know that if a person has like a wool piece of clothing or whatever it is, you probably want to check to make sure there's no linen mixed into it. Recently, I just someone my brother-in-law gave me like some it wasn't his, some friend of his had like a bunch of pieces of clothing which are like my size. Some like wealthy dude who like didn't wear any of his clothing and basically got rid of it. So I was like, all right, whatever. So I got some nice clothing, and basically like I was like there's this really nice sweater. I was like, oh, amazing. And I look at it, it's like I'm like, oh, I wonder I should get a check for shatnez. It says like wool and linen. I like didn't check it for shatnez, got rid of it. Okay, bottom line is shatnez applies both outside of Israel and in Israel and outside of Israel. Okay, why? Because that's a mitzvah which is not talui in land. It's not based on the land. Kilayim, which is like its cousin, kilayim is about having different types of seeds mixed together. That is only applicable in Israel. Okay, so thank God it's not as relevant to us, but basically the prohibition is you can't plant two different types of species together in the same place. Outside of Israel, it doesn't exist. Inside Israel, it does exist. It's worth mentioning, outside of Israel, though, there is a prohibition against two types of seeds if grapes are one of them. Okay, so if you have a vineyard or a person, so not so relevant to most of us, if a person's planting like tomatoes and cucumbers, whatever it is, for us in America, we don't have to worry too much about a kilayim. But if a person is planting a vineyard, then there is an issue of kilayim when it comes to grapes and other species, because that is doraisa, whatever, and therefore it does apply outside of Israel. But fine. Today we're not going to talk about vineyard type of kilayim. We're talking about kilayim which would apply in Israel. And basically the prohibition is you can't plant two types of seeds together. Now, why can't you plant them together? It's rabbinic. And the idea is like this, a couple of principles that we're going to learn. And that is that Chazal estimated, and we'll see the source for it soon, that it takes 1.5, that a seed, if you plant a seed over here, for 1.5 tefachim underground, it's going to be grabbing nourishment, right? We know that underground, it starts to spread out and grab nourishment. Now, the prohibition against kilayim is not about the nourishment when it comes to the rabbinic kilayim. It's more about, or even a biblical, I should say, it's more about the appearance of them being together. Okay, so we're about to learn, the Chazal are about to tell, Mishnah is about to tell us how tightly you could pack a whole bunch of different species into one small place. And the issue is not going to be so much about what's actually happening underground. The issue is going to be more about how does it look? Does it look like they're actually together, or does it look like they're separate? Okay? That's our little introduction. Let's begin. Okay? So the Gemara says, Mishnah says, Minayin la'aruga. How do you know from where do we see a source? Again, it's that same structure. There's a third Mishnah where we've been saying minayin. From where? So from where do we know that a garden patch, that's what an aruga is, shisha al shisha tvachim, which is 6 tvachim by 6 tvachim, okay? Shezorim besocha chamisha zaronim, that you're able to plant within it 5 types of species, 5 types of seeds. Arba ruchos aruga, 4 types on each side of the patch. The achas be'emsa and 1 in the center. Okay, I think everyone here has an art scroll. So if you look, that little picture over there, right? You see the picture? So there's 1 seed in the middle, and then, right, this is 6 tvachim by 6 tvachim. Each box represents 1 tefach, so it's 6 tvachim by 6 tvachim. And there's, 1 types of seeds on the top, 1 type of, like in the north, 1 in the east, 1 in the west, 1 in the south, right? So each side has a different type of species, right? Imagine those dots on each side. 1 is tomatoes, 1 is cucumbers, 1 is, okay, I don't know, I gave up, peppers, and 1 is carrots, okay? And cabbage is in the middle. Fine. So basically, each one is a different type of species, right? This is permitted, even though, right? So let's just understand what's going on over here. The corners are certainly drawing sustenance from one another, right? But since they are in different directions, right? They're perpendicular to one another. It looks like they're separate. Even though underground there's clearly, but the middle one, since it's not perpendicular to the other ones, it's more connected to the other ones. There we need 1.5 tefachim separating from each one, right? So if you look, there's 3 tefachim between each species, because the middle one is drawing sustenance 1.5. The one on each side is drawing sustenance 1.5, and therefore you're going to have 3 tefachim between each one. Okay, but now the Gemara wants to know what's the source for this. So the Gemara says, "Shenemar ki haaretz totzit simcha uchegana zeru eha tatzmiach." For it says, the earth gives forth its plant, like a garden causes its seed to sprout. Zaro lo nemar ela zeru eha. It doesn't say seed, but it says seeds. Okay, so the Gemara now is going to unpack this pasuk a little bit and explain to us how you see that there are 5 different species growing in a place of 6 by 6. So my mashma, the Gemara asks, what is the implication of the pasuk? Rav Yehuda. He breaks down the pasuk. Ki haaretz totzit simcha. For like the earth gives forth its plant. Totzi, the fact that it says totzi implies 1 species. Simcha, its plant implies another species. We're up to 2. Haretz rei. Zeru eha, the next word in the pasuk says zeru eha, and that's plural of seeds. Ha'arba, that's 4. Tatzmiach, the next word is it will sprout. That's 1. Hachamisha, we see from here that there are 5. The kim lehulu rabbanan, and Chazal determined dechamsha b'shita lo yanki mehadadi, that 5 species will grow in a 6 tefach patch, and they will not draw nourishment explicitly one from another. And tomorrow we're going to see how they know that 6 tefachim is going to be the right measurement. This pasuk tells us that 5 species are in one spot, but it doesn't talk about the 6 tefachim, and we're going to learn tomorrow how the 6 tefachim thing comes about. If you look on the page already, you see all those graphs over here. Don't worry, it's not going to be so overwhelming. It's not like a geometry class or something, but we're gonna get into a little more detail about where this, where we could see the 6 tefachim is the measurement. Okay, not so bad. Okay, we'll pick up on this tomorrow. Learn a little Rav Eliyahu Dessler, Michtam Eliyahu, where he says some fascinating ideas. Okay, so he says like this: we are in a piece called "The Ego, the Inclinations, the Spirit, and the Soul." Okay, so this is a letter that he writes. It's fascinating. He writes this letter on a train. In 1940, okay, and he was there. He was visiting students, and now he's traveling back. And again, he had a yeshiva before the war. The war made everyone separate, but during this time, he keeps up with all the students. I mean, just the whole background to this entire book is fascinating. And he's writing letters to them the entire time, kind of trying to give them chizuk, etc., etc. And they're asking him like these philosophical questions and what's going on, So. He's writing a letter. I just want to read to you a line. We're not going to get to this part, but he says, "I'll add some more, my beloved ones, my talmidim, because you are very, very dear to me, although the jolting of the train makes it very difficult for me to write." Right? So he's writing, again, now Amtrak, okay, it's not so bad, right? But the trains back in the day, 1940, you can imagine, what's going on, and his train's bumping all around, but he's trying very hard to write a letter to these students because he feels dedicated to them, and he's writing, and they had a question, and he wants to answer the question. Okay, fine. So what's the question? The question they asked him was about the ego, the inclinations, the spirit, and the soul. They want to understand what's the inner workings of our psyche, our body, like from a spiritual perspective, right? What's going on? So he suggests like this. He says something very interesting. He says, there's something called the ruah. There's something called nefesh. Nefesh is our spirit, okay? And there's something called neshama. Neshama is our soul, okay? Now the nefesh, he suggests, is He used the word ego. I'm not sure if there's like Freudian ego, but basically ego, what we call more like our basic human elements. And what he means by that is we have within what he describes as our ego, we have both a natural Yetzer Tov and a natural Yetzer Hara. Okay, what he means by that is as follows. What he means is that we have within ourselves a general inclination for good, right? We have some innate desire to do goodness, which is almost like a like a young child, or some of it, like it's innate, where a person does kindness, a person does goodness, and that's something which is almost natural to them, right? And then there is a natural drive towards things which are going to, we'll call evil, but it's hard to call evil because it's almost natural. In other words, a person has a drive to eat, right? A person has a drive to procreate. There are certain drives which exist within ourselves, which are all natural. Meaning you could see these things like in the brain. You could see these things like in a much more natural way. Our natural Yetzer Tov and our natural Yetzer Hara. And then he argues there is a supernatural Yetzer Tov and a supernatural Yetzer Hara. Right? It's interesting to me because you normally find either those who say that our Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara are completely natural because there are parts of us which are driven towards good, there are parts of us which are driven towards bad, or there are those who say no, it's all like the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, like the dudes like hanging on our shoulders, like that's totally supernatural. He says there are two layers. He says there's the natural inclinations and drives we have to do what's good. Right? So there's a part of us which just like is inclined towards good. There's a part of us which is inclined towards things which are much more fulfilling of our own base needs. And then he suggests that there is a more spiritual side of it, which is, what we'll call the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, which is the more spiritual side as well. So he says there's like two layers of battles that are happening that exist. Okay? And that's important as we continue to think about these ideas, to almost distinguish. There's like going to be like, okay, you tell there's certain drives which are completely we'll call them like healthy. There are healthy drives that we have. Okay, we have to curb them, but they're healthy. We wouldn't call them evil. And then there are certain things which will say, no, this is like evil, right? In other words, so even like within a Yetzer Hara, there's the natural. We'll call that like just healthy. A person needs this for their biology. They need this for their well-being. Okay, and then there's a drive, and then there's something called the Yetzer Hara, which is beyond that, which is basically pushing a person towards doing things which we'll call, no, this is like too much. This is beyond, right? So there's the natural, which helps us function, and then there is the supernatural, okay? So then he quotes the pasuk. The pasuk in the Torah says that Hashem breathed into us as individuals the neshama of life, right? Hashem breathed a soul into us. So he says, by definition, when the pasuk tells Hashem breathed the soul into us, that means that there exists an identity independent of the neshama. Another place to look at this is we say in the morning davenings, Elokai neshama shenasata bi. Right? What does that mean? Elokai neshama, right? If I were to ask you, what is your essence? As a Jew, what's your essence? You would tell me, my soul. You'd say my soul, right? So your soul is your essence. But it's not true. It's not our entire identity. Why? Because what do we say in davening today? Elokai, God, neshama, the soul, shenasata bi, which you placed into me. That means that I have an identity independent of my neshama. Right? And so that's what he's trying to get us to understand. We're not have time to unpack this further. But the point is that there is an identity, there's a me that exists outside of my neshama. There's an identity which could exist separate from my neshama. Elokai neshama shenasata bi. I have an identity, that's my nefesh. My nefesh is who I am, independent of those spiritual yearnings, independent of whatever the neshama represents, which we'll get into. But Elokai neshama shenasata bi, there is me and there is my neshama. And they're really, in some ways, I have an identity completely independent of that spiritual yearning. My neshama is not my entire identity. And I know this sounds very esoteric, but I think it's important sometimes to think about, what's going on in our minds. Sometimes if you want to do have some fun and drive yourself crazy, to think about whenever you have choice in your head. If you start listening to that inner dialogue, yes, we all, many of us have inner dialogues, and to think which person is something. Is it first person, second person? Is again a little Freudian, but also a little bit what Chazal speak about, and that is that I want this cookie. You shouldn't have the cookie, right? As opposed to you should have, right? You never, right? Think about what the way we speak. I want the cookie. What's that? That means it's me, right? I want it. You shouldn't have the cookie. That sounds like it's external to me, right? So which is the I speaking and which is the you speaking that's going on inside? Because there is all these layers of different things. And some of them are more me than others. There's the nefesh, there's the neshama, and the neshama is more external to me. So oftentimes the voice that might be pushing me away from doing something might be a little bit more of an external voice than the I voice, right? So have some fun today, but just try to tap into that nefesh, neshama, and we'll get a little bit further into this. Okay, have a wonderful day.